Get hyped, Path of Exile fans, because we finally have a date. Path of Exile 2's early access is launching on November 15th, 2024. That's right, we'll be slaying monsters and grabbing loot in just a few short months. While there's still a lot we don't know about Path of Exile 2, the recent announcements have given us a lot to be excited about. It's clear that Grinding Gear Games is crafting something really special, a game that takes everything we love about Path of Exile and cranks it up to 11, so what exactly can we expect from Path of Exile 2's early access? What's new? What's changed? Let's break it down. Mark your calendars for November 15th, because that's when the Path of Exile 2 party begins. It seems like Grinding Gear Games is going all in with this early access release. There's no mention of special supporter packs or limited access keys, so it's looking like anyone who wants to jump in can do so on day one. Just like the good old days of Path of Exile 1. So, what will we be playing come November? We know for sure that early access will include the first 6 acts of Path of Exile 2's campaign. That's a whole lot of new story, new areas to explore, and new monsters to bash. However, details about the endgame, the stuff you do after you finish the main story, are still under wraps. We're also in the dark about crafting, which is a huge part of Path of Exile. Grinding Gear Games is keeping those cards close to their chest for now. And speaking of mysteries, there's one big question mark hanging over the early access launch: the Druid. Path of Exile 2 is slated to have at least 7 classes at launch, but the Druid was MIA in the recent Gamescom demo. Does this mean our shapeshifting friends won't be playable right away? We'll have to wait and see. The lack of concrete info just makes things even more exciting. What crazy endgame challenges will await us? What new crafting recipes will we discover? Will we finally get to live out our wildest Druid fantasies? November can't come soon enough. Hold on to your hats, Exile, because Path of Exile 2's gem system is getting a complete makeover. And we're not just talking about a fresh coat of paint. This is a ground-up redesign that will change the way you build your character and approach every fight. In Path of Exile 1, gems were tied to specific character classes. Want to play a spell-slinging Templar? Tough luck. Those fireballs are for witches only. But in Path of Exile 2, gems are now categorized by weapon type and playstyle. So, if you want to wield a flaming axe as a Templar, go for it. This opens up a world of possibilities for creative builds, and lets you experiment with all sorts of different playstyles. But the biggest game changer is this: your basic attacks, the ones you use all the time, like swinging your sword or firing your bow, can now be supported by skill gems. And get this, they don't even cost mana. This means that even your most basic attacks can become build-defining powerhouses. Imagine a flurry of sword swings that poison enemies, or a barrage of arrows that zap them with lightning. This change alone has the potential to completely shake up the Path of Exile meta, especially for melee characters who often felt like their basic attacks were just filler moves. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility, or at least some balancing concerns. Some players are worried that this new system will lead to a builder-spender meta, where you spam basic attacks to build up resources and then unleash a super powerful ability. We've seen this in other action RPGs, and it can sometimes feel repetitive or limiting. Only time will tell how this plays out in Path of Exile 2, but Grinding Gear Games is known for their meticulous approach to balance, so we're hopeful that they'll find a way to make it fun and engaging. And speaking of balance, here's another big change. Support gems now have capacity limits based on your character's attributes. In simpler terms, the stronger your character is in a certain attribute, like strength, dexterity, or intelligence, the more support gems of that type you can use. This is a huge deal because it makes your character's attributes much more important. In Path of Exile 1, attributes were often seen as a means to an end. You only cared about them because they let you use certain gear or gems. But in Path of Exile 2, your attributes directly impact how many powerful support gems you can use, which means every point counts. All in all, the gem system changes are arguably the most significant aspect of Path of Exile 2's early access. They're not as flashy as a new trailer or a release date announcement, but they're the foundation upon which the entire game is built. These changes have the potential to make Path of Exile 2 a completely different beast from its predecessor, and we can't wait to see how it all plays out. Beyond the massive gem system overhaul, Path of Exile 2 is getting a bunch of smaller gameplay tweaks that might not sound like much on paper, but they add up to a significantly refined experience. Grinding Gear Games has been listening to player feedback, and it shows. One of the most welcome changes is the removal of boss fight cheesing. In Path of Exile 1, players could sometimes escape tricky boss encounters by portaling back to town to heal up or restock on potions. This tactic, while sometimes necessary, could trivialize challenging fights. Path of Exile 2 says no more. Once you enter a boss arena, you're committed. You'll need to rely on your skills and your build to survive, making victory all the sweeter. This change is especially impactful for hardcore players who only get one life per character. No more easy outs. Another significant change is the way enemy damage is calculated. In Path of Exile 1, there was a clear distinction between spells and attacks. Spells hit harder but could be mitigated with specific defenses, while attacks were weaker but harder to avoid. Path of Exile 2 streamlines this system by removing the distinction entirely. Enemy damage is enemy damage, regardless of the source. This means that evasion, a stat that previously only worked against attacks, can now help you dodge spells too. This change simplifies the game while also making evasion a more appealing defensive option for many builds. Remember how we talked about attributes becoming more important in Path of Exile 2? Well, here's another example. Strength now gives you a lot more life, and intelligence gives you a lot more mana. This makes perfect sense, given that there's no longer a way to stack percent-based life or mana on the passive skill tree, like in Path of Exile 1. Your core attributes are now essential for survival and resource management, making those early character building choices even more impactful. On top of these core changes, Path of Exile 2 is getting a bunch of smaller quality of life improvements. For example, there are new visual indicators that tell you when you miss an attack, making it easier to adjust your positioning or gear. There are also hints that we'll be getting even more visual feedback for things like status ailments, which would be a welcome addition for players who like to see, and hear, the impact of their actions. And if that wasn't enough, flasks, your trusty, consumable potions, might now recharge from all kills, not just those from tougher enemies. This could drastically change the pacing of combat and exploration, making the game feel more fluid and less reliant on grinding specific monster types. These gameplay tweaks might seem minor compared to the gem system overhaul, but they demonstrate Grinding Gear Games' commitment to polish and player feedback. They're taking what worked in Path of Exile 1 and refining it, smoothing out the rough edges, and adding new layers of depth and challenge. While the bulk of the recent Path of Exile 2 news has focused on systems and mechanics, Grinding Gear Games has also teased some juicy content tidbits to keep our hype levels soaring. First up, we've got 3 brand new boss fights to look forward to. The recent trailer showcased encounters with a menacing bow engineer, a returning and presumably even tougher version of the Act 2 boss, the Perennial King, and a mysterious foe known only as Gold Crush. Details are scarce, but these fights look distinct from anything we've seen in Path of Exile 1, featuring unique mechanics and visually stunning arenas. Speaking of visually stunning, did someone say cinematics? That's right, Path of Exile 2 might be taking a page from Diablo's book and adding in-engine cutscenes to enhance the storytelling. While nothing is confirmed, the recent trailer featured shots of the mysterious antagonist Lumius that look suspiciously high quality, hinting at a level of cinematic polish we haven't seen in the franchise before. This could be a game changer for Path of Exile's narrative presentation, adding emotional weight and epic scope to the already compelling story. And speaking of Lumius, who is this enigmatic figure? He seems to be a major player. In Path of Exile 2's story, appearing prominently in key art and trailers, we know he's connected to the Contest, the mysterious entity that narrates the Path of Exile 2 trailers, and he might even be the new leader of the Templars, a powerful faction from Path of Exile 1. What role will he play in our exile's journey? Is he friend or foe? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, Lumius has our attention. With early access just around the corner, the Path of Exile 2 hype train is picking up steam. Grinding Gear Games has given us a tantalizing glimpse of what's to come, but there are still plenty of mysteries to unravel. The upcoming Xbox game showcase might hold some answers. Path of Exile 2 is listed as part of the event, so fingers crossed for some juicy reveals. players are eagerly awaiting more information about ascendancies, specialized character subclasses that unlock powerful new abilities, as well as crafting, endgame progression, and maybe even a release date for the full game. It's been a long wait since Path of Exile 2 was first announced back in 2019, but if the recent news is anything to go by, Grinding Gear Games has been hard at work crafting something truly special. Path of Exile 2 is shaping up to be a worthy successor, a game that builds upon the solid foundation of its predecessor while introducing bold new ideas and refinements that could redefine the action RPG genre. November 15th can't come soon enough. As usual, this is Lucy signing off.